Video. Just getting ready here for my live broadcast. Today I'm going to talk about how to use your home to glorify God and how to be a good steward of your home. So I'm going to share some thoughts on this, and then I'd like you to leave a little comment about either how you've used your home to try to minister to other people, or how you've experienced someone else opening up their home to you, and using it for God's glory and for serving the Lord and serving other people. So I'm going to share a little bit today out of just some thoughts from different scriptures. I'm not going to quote scriptures. I'm just going to talk about some of them. We need to be good stewards of our home. And one of the principles the Bible teaches about is hospitality. In the Old Testament, God chose Abraham, and through Abraham, he promised that he would make of him a great nation, and that through him all the nations of the world would be blessed. And through Abraham came Jesus Christ, and through Jesus Christ, all the nations of the world are being blessed. And so Abraham received the three visitors, where he had an experience with God through these three visitors who came and visited him and told him that Isaac would be born. Now, when he saw the visitors, he went and he prepared a fatted calf. He told his wife to prepare some bread for them, and she cooked 3 measures of meal, which ground up flour, and that's about enough to feed 50 people. So they were very hospitable. He went out. Veal, was the best meat, I suppose, that you could give a guest. The fatted calf. You prepare this. You have this animal, and then when the most important guest arrives, that you feed it to them. I don't know if Abraham knew that he was having a spiritual experience when this started, or if he was just that hospitable to when guests came. In the Old Testament, Lot saw some men that were coming into the city, and I don't know if he knew that they were angels, probably, maybe not, but he knew that the people of the city would try to molest them, would try to treat them badly. So he didn't want the men of the city to do that to them, so he invited them into his home. There's another man in Gibeah who's going to spend the night in the square, and a Levite who lived there knew that there were troublemakers in that city who would cause trouble, similar to the Sodom and Gomorrah situation, and he invited that man into his home. It was good morals to invite people into your home. In the New Testament, the Bible talks about hospitality, and it's a translation of a word that means love of foreigners, or love of people from out of town. Xenia in the classical Greek period was anybody who wasn't from that city, because they, if you're away from where you live, you're vulnerable. You don't have a place to stay. In Athens, for example, you wouldn't even have any legal representation before the government unless it went through whoever your host was. So the Bible commands to be given to hospitality. The Bible never calls hospitality a spiritual gift. Some people talk about the gift of hospitality. God's grace can work in manifold ways. I don't think every area where God's grace works through someone has to be specifically listed. But I just find it interesting that 2 spiritual gift passages mention hospitality, and one of them, both of them command hospitality, and neither one say it's a spiritual gift. So after listing spiritual gifts, Paul commands the Romans, in Romans he says to show hospitality. I believe it's Peter who says, after talking about using spiritual gifts, he says show hospitality without grudging. People come to your house and eat your food. You might you should not begrudge them that. There's a parable about a man who goes and knocks on his neighbor's door, and knocks and asks for food because some guests came from out of town. There was no telephone back then, probably no reliable postal service. And some people just show up at your door. They're guests, and you know them, your relative, your friend. You've met them somewhere, and you're morally obligated to let them stay in your house because we're commanded to share, and the Bible teaches hospitality. It certainly was an example in the Old Testament time. So a Jewish person who is a righteous person might show hospitality to people that come into town. So he doesn't have any food in this parable, and so he knocks on the neighbor's door, and even if the neighbor wouldn't get up because he's his neighbor, he would get up because the guy just keeps knocking on the door. Hey, I need some food, and gives him a few loaves of bread or something, so that he will have some food to give to the neighbors who came in. So you can imagine if you were a rather poor person in the first century and you just had enough food for yourself for that day, and that you had prepared food day by day, then you may need to knock on the neighbor's door, make sure they had any leftovers if you wanted to feed some bread to the people that came in. So when we're given stuff by God, we need to, and when I say given stuff by God, I don't necessarily mean there's this big silver platter that comes down and says, this is your house. But, God blesses the efforts of your work. He gives you the ability to breathe. He gives you the ability to walk around. He gives you the ability to have good health. He puts you in a family. He lets you be raised, and you get an education, or you do whatever you do, and you're able to earn a living, and you're able to live in a home, and God has blessed, enabled, provided for you. Then you also should provide what you can and share with others. Now, we talk about how God can use your home. You also want to be a good steward of your home, your car, your clothes, your everything you've got. We're all supposed to be good stewards of everything we have, of our time. But I'm focusing on the home now, and I'm going to talk about some areas where in the past people's homes could be of benefit to the kingdom of God, helping other people, and could be a blessing. Now, Jesus sent the apostles out, and he had them stay in the house of someone who was worthy in each city or town. He sent them out, and he said, in every city or town where they preach, they're supposed to preach, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand, heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils. He said, freely you have received, freely give. And then when they were to travel around, they would ask who was worthy in a city or town, and then they would go stay with that person. And if the person would receive them, then they were to let their peace rest upon it. They would bless them with shalom, I suppose. But if not, their peace was to return to them. They were to shake off this dust of their feet. If a city wouldn't receive them, if a house wouldn't receive them, if a city or town wouldn't receive them, they were supposed to do the same thing. So this was the way that God provided. In one of the Gospels, Jesus also said this similar things to the 70 that he sent out to preach. And he told them that the laborer is worthy of his meat. The laborer is worthy of his due. So the apostles deserved to eat and to live of the gospel. So they would go to someone's house, and the person was supposed to receive them. They should receive the messenger of the truth of God. And if they didn't, then the apostles would shake off the dust of their feet. Maybe the idea was they didn't want the dust that was going to be judged to be on them. And so it wasn't good for that city or house. But it's a blessing if they received them. So the apostles in Acts, after Christ ascended to heaven, and they were sharing the gospel with other people, they would teach the people from house to house. So there were people who would open up their homes to let the gospel be preached, unless the apostles were preaching only in their own homes. But I don't think so, because Mark's mother's house and Barnabas' sister had a house where people could come together and pray. And so before Paul was known as Paul, but when he was Saul of Tarsus, but his other name was Paul. But when he was going around and persecuting the church, he would go into houses and drag people out. So the Christians were apparently meeting in homes from believers who would open up their homes to bless other people. Now, you don't have to own a home to open up your home. If you rent a place, or even if you have a little dorm room, you can use it to whatever ability you have to glorify God. Now, the apostles, let's see, there's a man named Judas who lived on Straight Street in Damascus. Now, Paul, or Saul of Tarsus, had heard Jesus talk to him and say, why do you persecute me? And this experience on the Damascus road, and he was blinded by this light. And so he found a place in Damascus of a man named Judas, not Judas Iscariot, another Judas. Judas means Judah, with a Greek ending on it. And he went to this house, and the man allowed him to stay there and pray. And then Jesus gave a vision to Ananias, and Ananias heard the Lord, and the Lord told him to go to Saul of Tarsus and the things that Saul would do, and he went and he baptized him. And then, so this was even a house being used for the glory of God. I don't know if Judas was, it seems likely he might have been a Jewish man, especially with the name Judah, or Yehuda or whatever, but he apparently opened up his house. Whether he was a believer in Jesus or not, that happened in someone's house that allowed Saul of Tarsus to stay there. Now, there's a man named Simon the Tanner who had a house by the seaside, and I believe it said it was by the sea. And then Peter, he was allowing Peter to stay there. He was allowing Peter to pray on his roof. Peter was probably a guest in his home. And because he allowed that to happen, these events took place through his home. And there was a man named Cornelius, and he was in his own home, and an angel spoke to him. Cornelius was a Gentile who had done good works, and God noticed his good works and chose him and chose to send an angel to him. And an angel came and told him to send for Peter. And then the man's messengers went to Peter and called him back to Cornelius's house. And Cornelius had a gathering of his household in his house, and he allowed Peter into his own home. And through allowing Peter into his own home, the gospel was received by him and the other Gentiles there in the house, because he opened up his home to the apostle Peter to come and preach. So these are ways through people opening up their home. Two people opened up their homes, and one opened it up to Peter, another opened up the home to Peter, and through this, the gospel was able to come to the Gentiles. And many of us are from various nations around the world. Not all believers in Jesus are Jewish, are from a Jewish background, and we're all blessed because the gospel was preached among the Gentiles, because people like this open their homes. The Philippian jailer, who was guarding Paul and Silas in stocks, he opened up his home to Paul and Silas after that earthquake, and then he heard the gospel, and he believed in Jesus and was baptized. Then a new convert named Lydia, she opened her home, and the brethren were able to gather there and hear Paul and be encouraged of the new believers in Jesus in that city. I believe it was Philippi. Later, when Paul was going back towards Jerusalem, he stayed in the home of Philip the evangelist, and he was apparently probably in the house there. That's possibly the venue, but because he was being able to stay there, the prophet Agabus gave a prophetic word for him. Now, also, Paul, when he was wanting to go to Corinth, he wrote a letter. He said that he was hoping that they would enable him, they would help him to reach the regions past him. And I suspect that there were people who would open up their homes to Paul and insist, you must come and stay with me. You must come stay here. We'll take care of you. We'll feed you. And I don't know if they said it that way, but they brought him into their home and they fed him and they took care of him. So hospitality can be a means of spreading the gospel, because if there's someone who's evangelizing, who's preaching the gospel, or someone who's going around and encouraging brethren and teaching and ministering in churches or whatever, or there are people that are doing kind of soul-winning journeys, you can open up your home and allow people to come in. There was a brother that I met in Indonesia who was from Papua, which is, they used to call it Irian Jaya, and it's the western part of the Papua island that has Papua New Guinea on one part, which was an English colony, and then there was the Dutch area that became part of Indonesia on the other half of the island. So his ancestors were from there. He was born there, he's raised there, and he became like a missionary to the rest of Indonesia, and he did all kinds of missionary work. He did some church planting. Well, I met him at a little event, and so we got in touch with him, my wife and I believe we offered to allow him to stay in our home. He had somewhere else he was staying, and when he came into town. But when he came into town one time, that place wasn't open, so we invited him to come and stay in our home. There was a Singaporean evangelist, an Indian man from Singapore, who we would have come and stay in our home. So we also have opened up our home to, when we were in Indonesia, there was a preacher from Africa. We had him come stay in our home and put on a little Bible study, and we had another preacher from Africa who we hosted. And so we've had people come in, and we've had in America, we had someone who was going overseas as a missionary, and he was in transit, and he was moving. We heard about him I believe my wife might have met him at when she went to a Christian concert kind of thing, this spontaneous sort of concert or thing that was going on, and invited him, and we had him come and spend a night while he was in transition moving to Germany. So we've opened up our home to different things like this, and we've also hosted meetings in our home, and we have sort of ad hoc impromptu meetings. We've had regular kind of meetings in our home, and this is something that we've wanted to do, whether we were renting our home or whether we own a home. We want to use the facilities that we're living in for the glory of God. So these are things that you can do as stewardship, and we're happy to see that. We want our house to be a blessing. I don't want to just accumulate stuff for me with a selfish motive, and I try to guard my heart against that. And I want to be a good steward before God. I want God to see how I'm using what He's entrusted to me, that He sees in my heart that it belongs to the Lord, and that I'm using it well for His glory. So what I would like for you to do, if you want to share something about how you use your home, or if you've been blessed by somebody else opening up their home to you, to let you stay there, to be a place where you could pray, to be a place where you could come and hear about the gospel of Jesus Christ. Anything along those lines, feel free to share a little comment down there. I think it could be encouraging. It can also give people ideas. You know, one idea I've heard of people who do things along these lines, but you could invite neighbors over to your home. I just thought about it. If we just invited, you know, 3 or 5 households to our house and had a dinner, and then share the gospel with them, or build up a relationship with them and share a little bit about our faith and try to build that relationship. You know, if you could go through all the 100 houses or 500 houses or 300 houses or 50 houses in your neighborhood, that would be a way that you you could reach out to your neighborhood. I haven't done anything that's systematic. We have had some neighbors over, but I've thought about it. We may have some traveling going on. It may not be possible to do all that in the short term, at least. But that's something. These are some ideas that you could do to share in your neighborhood. Also, if you live in I lived in a very crowded city with terrible traffic. It was hard to get around. And if there's a Bible study on every street, then people can go to midweek meetings. It enables midweek meetings to have meetings in your home. Also, if you're watching this and you're a church leader, it's really good to allow people to minister in their own spiritual gifts and to fellowship with one another. I know some churches will give out programs. You have to do this, and this. You have to discuss the sermon and things like that. But a lot of things that are really edifying in church is when people don't necessarily have a script and they end up praying for one another, or they end up prophesying, or they end up doing something that ministers to other people. In our home recently, we had somebody who wasn't a Christian that my wife had prayed for. My wife had prayed for her leg, and the pain had stopped. And so she was very open, and she was, wanting to come and pray with my wife again. And we had her over for dinner, and she was sharing this with my wife after this meeting. And we had kind of a mixture. We told her we were going to do some praying. We were going to pray. We moved to a new house. We were going to pray to dedicate what we were doing in the house, or dedicate the home and the use of the home to the Lord, and pray that we'd be good stewards and things like that. So, we let people who come know what we were doing so that they wouldn't feel ambushed or anything like that. You've got to treat some people with some basic respect along those lines. But a lot of people don't care. And a lot of people don't care if you pray for them, even if they don't believe in God. I mean, they know that you're trying to be kind, as long as they're not super militant atheists. A lot of people don't, they're happy that you pray for them, even if they're not they don't have any particular religion or whatever. So anyway, there's a lot of things that you can do that people will appreciate and warm up to, and even if they don't, you want to be faithful to God in everything that you do. Also, some other things that the houses were used for in the Bible. Aquila and Priscilla, in 2 locations, I believe, they had a church in their house. I believe it's Romans. I think it's 1 Corinthians also mentions the church in their house. Now, they had lived in, if I'm not mistaken, they had lived in, I want to say Ephesus and also Rome at different times. And I think they were in Rome, and did they get kicked out to Greece, or was it Ephesus over on the Turkey side? I believe it was Ephesus. They were in Rome, and the Jews were kicked out, and they probably had to leave when the Jews were kicked out of Rome for a little while. And then they were in Ephesus and opened up their house, and then they go back to Rome, or I think that was the order in which the epistles were written. I'm not 100% sure of that. They went. I have to look it up, but they went back to Rome, and they had a church in their house. So there's someone named Nymphas who had a church in his house. There was also the greeting to Philemon. It says, "And the church in thy house." Now it addresses several people there. I think it's Philemon's church in his house, or maybe it's Archippus or whatever. One of those other people in the passage there. But They didn't have church buildings back then. There's no evidence they were building church buildings. They met in the temple, which already existed. They were meeting from house to house in Jerusalem. And then James mentions that someone comes into your synagogue, so they might have used synagogue buildings. Synagogue could also be a gathering place. That passage mentions if someone comes in and they're, dressed in vile raiment and they're poor, and then you say, sit here under my footstool. So synagogues could be in homes too. I don't know if a synagogue building would have a footstool, but a home might. And a gathering, synagogue meant gathering, and it was also used to refer to the building, kind of like the word church evolved from an assembly to, after a few hundred years, it meant the building. Ecclesia. I meant that. Church is a later word in history. So the church in English. So the Bible encourages us to be given to hospitality. So we should be willing to open our homes for guests, for people who are out of town. It's something that teaches you to share. It's something that teaches you to be a good steward, to share some of your food with people, to share some of your time, to let other people and the opportunity to bless them intrude into your me time a little bit, to be a bit more of a sharer. It's good for your character, and also it's a real blessing to get to know people. There's so many treasures out there, so many people out there that if you had not opened up your home to them, you might have missed out on a blessing. I know the evangelist from Singapore, he's passed away since, but I remember when I picked him up and I brought him over to my house, we'd corresponded online, and I was in the car with him, and he was just sharing and sharing and sharing with me, and I just had the feeling he's just trying to pour as much into me to encourage me and to strengthen me in my ministry and my faith as he can. And it's a real blessing just to have people like that in your life, and to open up your house. And my wife also, it's just, I'm not a great cook. I can cook a little bit. I could grill. I can make a few soups, maybe do some fried rice and things like that. My wife is a spectacular cook, and she is hospitable. So, and that really goes a long way. There's a lot of things when we have events that she just works so hard to put it in. I work hard too, but she's just put in so much time. We had an event, she stayed up till 4 o'clock cooking. Her food is spectacular, and people just rave about it and things like that. That's something, if you're single, that may be something you're considering. How are you going to live your lifestyle? How are you going to share? How are you going to share your finances and give? What is that going to look like when you're considering someone for a potential partner, a fellow believer? But also, are you going to open up your house? What kind of steward are you going to be of whatever living situation you have? No, maybe you have a very, very tiny, like a studio apartment in Hong Kong, tiny, kind of place. If you've never been to Hong Kong, you don't know what I'm talking about. But even the hotel room was miniaturized, it seemed like. But if you live in one of these big cities, it's very, very tiny location. There may be something you could do. Maybe you could have somebody over for dinner, or someone sleep on the floor, or something like that. But you have to be a good steward with whatever level the Lord has given you. If He's given you a lot of floor space, a lot of area, you might want to invest in some beds. Invest in some an air mattress and things like that, so that you can have people that come over and share and fellowship. And many of you may consider also, if there are evangelists, maybe one-on-one soul winner types. There are people that'll go around to churches, and churches kind of organize where they're going to stay. There are also people, who go around dragging a big cross around sharing the gospel, or driving around. I've met people. I met someone who used to do that, and or maybe her late husband, I think he's. Anyway, and then I've also met someone who just drives around and preaches to the homeless. There are a lot of people that are doing these ministries that aren't really formally supported, and there may be some things that you can do. Just open up your home, things like that, just to help. So anyway, if this video has been a blessing to you, if you think this would be a blessing to someone else, please click the share button, click the like button. I post videos. I'm going to try to post this one if I can, if they let me, on For the Faith, which is a channel that I use on Facebook to share ministry. Currently I'm doing my Saudara Link channel, which is on YouTube. So I'll probably post this on YouTube. I could put it on some other venues at some point in time. So anyway, please go ahead and subscribe to those if you would like. And if you share videos like this, it's good to share videos to encourage other people, and anything that you can do to encourage other people in the faith, whether it's sharing my video or something else, or sharing someone else's video, or doing something that's not sharing a video, that's good. You should have a heart to help all other people draw closer to God, love their fellow human beings, and do what's right before the Lord. If they don't believe, then you can help nudge them towards faith. If they're doing something unwise, and you can share with them some wisdom that you've gained through your knowledge of God, that's good. If someone is believes in Jesus but hasn't been baptized, and you encourage them to be baptized, if they're needing those first steps of discipleship and you can help them with that, you can share the word with them, meet with them regularly, pray with them regularly. Or if you can help them, you're maybe new yourself and you want to encourage them to meet somebody else and introduce them around to people, those are very useful ministries and wonderful things to do. And it's also good to open up your home and to share your food, share your life, share opportunities for ministry, share and let somebody else come into your home and minister. That can be a blessing also to other people. Thanks a lot for watching this video. May the Lord bless you, and I hope you continue to grow in knowledge and in the knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. Thank you.